So hi, I'm Maria Pieri. I'm the BSME 2020 chair. Thank you for joining myself, Jaimie Kaffash, Alex Mead and Tim Pollard today for our lockdown lunch. With much of the world in lockdown at the moment due to the current pandemic and many sectors facing challenges, we at the BSME are exploring alternative ways to share contacts, successes, and hopefully supporting others and helping the publishing businesses. We will host a rolling programme of online talks like today, webinars and reviews, and our hope is that these will complement the events that we have had to postpone or cancel this year. So if you've got any questions, do post them on the Q&A option, and we may also have a chat a little bit later, and we'll endeavour to obviously answer any of your questions at the end of the session. So firstly, straight off to the panel. I've actually got Jaimie first, so do you want to kick us off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself, your title, and an intro as to how things are currently going for you.
Sure, thanks Maria. So I'm Jaimie Kaffash, I'm editor of Pulse magazine, so we're a magazine for GPs, so obviously it's been a pretty intense time for us over the last couple of months. I think for us it probably started around sort of mid-February, before, potentially even before then. So in terms of what we've been doing, I think it's probably the proverbial game of two halves. So we've had incredible traffic. I'm talking unprecedented traffic. Without trying to give too much away, last month we had a couple of days where we were getting 500,000 views a day. So we're getting huge amounts of traffic at the moment, getting really good engagement as well. We're getting lots of comments and getting a lot of good feedback as well. So that's the plus side. But on the minus side, unfortunately, I think like everyone else at the moment, we're struggling with advertising as well. We're just not able to monetize this at all. So we've got a slightly different model to other people in that because of pharmaceutical advertising rules, we are only for GPs. But on the good side of that is that pharmaceutical companies can only advertise with us and other healthcare publications. But even they, who would be doing quite well out of this coronavirus, aren't actually advertising at the moment. They're being a bit more cautious, playing their cards close to their chest. So it's been a tough time. It's been an exhilarating time, but also a very tough time as well.
Thank you, that's a good start. And what we'll do is we'll pick up on the advertising thing a little bit later once I've introduced everyone. So Alex, do you want to go next and just tell us a bit about how you are, what you do, and how things are impacting you at the moment?
Sure, I'm Alex Mead. I'm editor of Rugby Journal and also consultant editor in food and travel. So a couple of different hats. And for Rugby Journal in particular, the hardest thing has obviously been the advertising. It's not even just the advertising pulling from our existing issue, which would have been, as an independent, the first time we actually made money in 3 years. It was also the fact that people aren't even paying bills for stuff they've already had. They're essentially using it as an excuse to not pay up. So, but nonetheless, we've had great support from all our journalists and our photographers, and being an independent, they kind of pulled together to really help us make sure we can get our next issue out. And actually with lockdown, we've been able to get some of the names as well, because they're all really happy to chat, even if it's face to face like this. But so we've actually got a good issue. We're just grateful to be able to get it out, really.
So that's a positive, actually, that you've actually managed to get some big names in just because they're a bit more accessible.
We've literally got the biggest name in British rugby in our next issue, which is amazing. So we're really chuffed. So and I'm not sure that particular person is actually in lockdown in Japan as well. So the fact that normally that would just never happen, the idea that someone is away on was a vacation, and now they're in lockdown in Japan and they're still talking to us and they're committing to us is brilliant. And other people, some interviews we've done, all our articles are really long, so they can be like 3,000 to 7,000 words. So we've done a series of talks, so we're doing an update every week. So you almost get a different insight into how that person is dealing with the situation as it changes. So that we're going to do 1 interview right up until the day, so speak to them every week until we literally go to print. So we'll have this complete timeline of a changing personality, which should be quite fascinating.
Fantastic, great. Thank you. Tim, how are you getting on?
Yeah, so I'm Tim Pollard. I'm the digital editorial director at Bauer Media, and I focus on the specialist and automotive websites. So I think at Bauer, we're the UK's biggest magazine publisher. It's a story of, it's different in every sector is what we're finding. So some of the celebrity and entertainment titles, which are not the ones I most closely work with, but they're actually seeing some very strong digital traffic at the moment, so people are staying in. they might be looking at films to watch, things to watch on Netflix. So brands like Empire are doing very well, we find, in digitally. Digital here more than print, because that's my sort of field of work. In the automotive sector, and that's my kind of background, I've been a motoring journalist for 20 years, it's been quite challenging. So the figures came out yesterday from the industry, and car sales, new car sales in March 2020 slumped by 44%. Now in April, that's going to go down even more, almost certainly, because people have got better things to do right now than go and buy cars. But they were unable to in many cases, because they're obviously on lockdown and people are staying in. So some of our websites where we deal with specialist long-tail niche areas, so I'm thinking motoring, golf and what have you, we're seeing quite big drops in traffic there. So some of the celebrity ones, the sites are performing very highly. Some of the more sort of purchase-oriented or product-led titles, that's where we're seeing drops. So we've adapted our web strategy quite significantly. We'll no doubt talk about this in the next hour or so. But there's many challenges in digital about focus, what we focus on. You know, that whole, unlike the flat plan of a magazine, clearly we've got, we can do whatever we want really every day. There's infinite space. So we're trying to sort of react with really useful, helpful explainers, which are working well on many of our sites, like parkers.co.uk, the car buying website. But then the conveyor belt of news stories, our access to test cars and test golf clubs and motorcycles is ground to a halt. So many, many challenges.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I ought to pipe in and just say a little bit about what we do, which is our main title is the National Geographic Traveller. And for us, obviously, people aren't travelling, everyone's in lockdown. It's been a challenge to find how to change tact and pivot and think about how we look to inspire people to travel rather than look at how we create content where we're actively asking them to travel. So it's probably from our side in our sector, advertising is a real challenge. It's not getting any easier by any means, although it's good to hear that other publications and other titles are doing very well. We are finding interest in people looking ahead, which is good for sort of 2021. But one area that I wanted to almost highlight as a positive for us, and I would like to discuss with you guys too, subscriptions have done really well for us. We did a subscription campaign on Monday, and we had over 900 subscriptions in one day, which is usually unheard of for us. So one positive, some things people are picking up, some things they are looking to read. And are you finding that you are seeing an increase either digitally or with your subscriptions and paper subscriptions because of the lockdown?
So can I take that one, Maria?
Yeah.
Can I take it on? So quite interesting. We've got a couple of subscription products, but because sort of our GPs are on the front line when it comes to this, I feel quite strongly that we can't put anything useful behind the paywall at the moment. We'll get absolutely slaughtered for it. It'll be massive reputational damage if we've got stuff that is actually going to be useful for GPs in treating patients, in managing their practice. If we put that behind the paywall, I mean, I can imagine the backlash that we're going to get for doing something like that. If it is useful, but if it's not useful, then no one's going to be reading it. At the moment, our readers are completely focused on treating patients and managing COVID-19. So that everything we do has to be geared towards that, and it's all vital stuff. So I'm a little bit worried about putting anything behind the subscription service. Having said that, we have had a bit of a spike in subscriptions for one of our products, but the problem is at the moment it's all about finance. Nobody's interested in finance. There's actually not much use for anyone at the moment because the health service is getting all the money that they need at the moment anyway. So we have had a bit of a problem about that. Can we put stuff behind the subscription service, and should we? And I sort of come to the conclusion, no, we shouldn't really be putting anything behind the paywall at the moment.
But are you seeing a spiking, say, for example, newsletter traffic, that kind of side of stuff?
Massively. So we're seeing a spike everywhere. I mean, if we could go to a subscription model now, then I'm sure we make money. But again, I mean, I think that would be the death of Pulse. We've just celebrated our 60th birthday. If we're then seen in a year's time as being the publication that put all their stuff behind the paywall when our readers need it the most, that would be absolutely serious life.
Of course, not yet, but good to build on. Alex, sorry?
Yes, I think for us, because we're independent, it's hard for us to, because we've got no newsstand, our distribution's gone down, so we can't print as many, and we haven't got the margin in the title because it's like because it's a coffee table journal, the print's really expensive. So it's even more expensive because we're printing less. So it's hard for us to do many deals without just losing money hand over fist. So we've actually put more content online of a certain kind. So we do a lot of grassroots stuff. So we do put a lot of grassroots online. And then we've just had to partner up with other brands that are similar. So we partnered up with Rhino so we can get a better subs deal. So at the moment, we're not sure where it's going to go because we think when you're charging £9 or £10 per copy, it goes to a slightly different bracket, I think. And I think maybe it'll be interesting to see how it sort of pans out over the next few weeks. So even there's a lot of words in our stuff, you've got 50,000 words. I think because we can't offer the deals, our subs are going to, we don't know, to be honest. And it'll be interesting for other independents, I think, who are in similar situations where without a newsstand, your print costs actually go up because you haven't got the units that you're selling on the newsstand usually, so everything's direct sale. So it's a bit more hit and miss for us, I think.
I think we're also seeing it by channel, aren't we? So our brands which are reliant on travel, for instance. So that's a big sector. All those WH Smiths at airports and railway stations, that has literally dried up overnight. I think the more independent sector and grocery channels are obviously remaining pretty strong and robust at the moment. But I know at Bauer we've seen, so on Car Magazine, for instance, the iOS and Android versions, so the digital ones, sales of those are going up. We've noticed a real spike in those. That's balanced by the challenge in some of the newsstand. I think throughout a lot of this, I think we're probably seeing the trends that are already happening. I mean, newsstand has been under pressure for the last decade, hasn't it? We really need to go to many supermarkets and see the shrinking, size of newsstand. And I think it's forcing us to adapt, isn't it? And try and work out, can we use digital delivery mechanisms which are more stable? They're more robust at times like this because obviously they are remaining open at the moment. So that's our kind of strategy at Bauer, I think. But we're all learning. It's early days at the moment.
Yeah, what we're finding distribution-wise is we're having to redeploy a lot of the magazines. But as you said, if WH Smith's Travel is closed, it's one of our biggest kind of areas where we sell lots of magazines. So we're looking at different ways of selling the current magazine. For example, for us, we've just set up an online page where you can just buy the current issue as opposed to buying the whole subscription. I'm not sure what the take-up will be on that yet, but we're just trying to think of other routes to market. Are you guys also finding difficulty with this distribution? I guess, Tim, you'd be the one that would have the most titles out using those channels.
Well, I think I sort of touched on it really. So yes, the travel sector is almost dried up entirely. I know the independent sector and grocery remains strong, but we've got also at the moment we're still broadly operating as we were, but with contingency plans in place. We have most of our major titles certainly have digital editions, for iPad and phone and what have you. That's where we're seeing the growth, and that's where that is quite stable as something. It's robust. I mean, rather than stable, it's that should still be there even if people can't get to the shops. Obviously, we don't really know how long this lockdown is going to last, do we? It sounds like it's going to extend beyond the initial 3 weeks, but that's where I suppose a lot of our focus. It's not really my department as editorial director. I'm sort of spending more time focused working out how we can get the content into those issues. But the whole supply and the commerce side of it is fascinating. Unfortunately, it's not my bag.
Well, that's actually, you've just touched on the next point, which is how are you creating content? How are you finding managing your teams or yourselves whilst working from home? How are you readapting and looking at how to create content for being under lockdown? Just throw it out to Jaimie to start off with.
I mean, content isn't a problem for us.
Not for you. That's why you've got the most content. But how are you working at home? How are you managing with your team? How many have you had to furlough any staff? How are you coping with it all?
So, I mean, luckily we haven't had to furlough staff, but we did have 2 open positions that we obviously haven't been able to fill. So we are vastly reduced capacity at the moment. And we have had to reconfigure the team slightly. So I've been taking a lot more of the sort of day-to-day, sort of getting the print issue out. We've been moving our feature assistant over to the news side, stuff like that. So we have had to reconfigure the team slightly. In terms of content, I mean, I've actually been quite explicit about this in editorial. I said we are going to be moving now only to stuff that's actually useful. So when I say that, I mean, let me give you an example. So we had Jeremy Hunt the other day came out with a ridiculous comment about I wish that we'd recruited more doctors, and on a normal day that would have had numbers through the roof. But we've actually been explicit. We're not going to be doing any sort of those gotcha journalism. We're only going to do stuff that is actually useful for GPs. You know, there are, I mean, to put it bluntly, there are GPs dying, there are healthcare workers dying. So everything we do is aimed at being of use. So we're still going to be holding the government accountable, we always do, but it's over things that matter right now. Like, are they getting their protective equipment? Are they getting tested? Are they getting the resources they need? Mm-hmm. So there has been a bit of a shift in that journalism. So it's not, like I said, we're taking not so much a critical line, more is this going to be useful to our readers? And I think that's been shown. I mean, we'll spend a lot of time on resources. One of the big issues that our readers are having is just an absolute overwhelming information. You've got information coming from all areas, from Public Health England, from NHS England. So that's probably been our biggest focus, actually, is making sure that we are filtering the information to them in that way. We're just moving away from that sort of gotcha journalism, slightly tabloidy, which we can do at times, but we've completely stopped that and have been explicit about that in editorials. In terms of content, I mean, I put this, I made a point on Twitter the other day that there was a story where GPs had rejected a contract, which I won't go into too much detail, but normally that'd be the biggest story, easily the biggest story of the year, without question. This time it was fourth biggest story of the day, So, like I say, content is not an issue for us, and reconfiguring the team has not been, has worked quite well. I mean, the team have been absolutely brilliant. I mean, I'm sure we'd all say that, but they've been absolutely brilliant. Work from home hasn't been much of an issue. The only other thing we brought is having told reporters to always pick up the phone no matter what. Don't wait for an email. Now we're saying these people are probably bang in the middle of saving lives at the moment. Send the text first, send the email first. You know what I mean? So that's another change that we've done. But I've been explicit about that with readers. I've said this all in the editorial as well. I think it's been well received as well.
Okay, thank you. And Alex, slightly different for you in terms of creating content. What are you doing? How are you changing how you think about it?
Well, it's interesting because we've also had to, so much of our stuff is about the photography. That's been a challenge. So luckily we had a couple of shoots before. Luckily we've got our Rugby Photographer of the Year competition. We've got the finalists for that. So we've got, 40 pictures, which will set the mag up quite nicely. Other ones, we've got to be more creative. We're looking at a bit of illustration maybe. We do a bit of history stuff, so we might do a little bit more historic stuff than normal. And some of them is just format, because we often tell the story of how we try to set the scene of where you are with that person and what they're doing. So that's quite hard. But then one of the people we're interviewing is deaf, so we couldn't do the interview over the phone. So then you don't want those answers that are quite staid. When someone has too much time, you email questions to people and they get back to you, it doesn't sound like them because they're trying to get themselves across in a different way, and you lose their accent and you lose language. So what we're actually doing with one person is we're doing a messenger interview. So it's a chat basically, and then we're stripping the whole chat out and doing that as an interview, the whole piece. So when she doesn't give me enough detail, I'll ask her for more detail and that will go in. So it is, you still get that personality side to it. But that aside, I think it's, we do a lot of stuff in travel and food as well. And the travel's a little bit harder, but we have to go much more to people who are in the market to get the story. Whereas normally you might send someone to a certain place. Now we're looking at people on the ground so they can paint the picture of what their city, town, or anything's like. So it's using different people, but actually I don't think it's too much of an issue. It's more been trying to make sure the magazine stays as visually strong as it always is. So that's a little bit trickier, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. And we've actually added a new section to our online presence because there's been other stories that affect the rugby world, which we decided that are coming to us direct, because normally the newsfeed is quite straightforward. This happens, this press conference. Now there's not that. So people are actually getting stories from all over the shop. And so now, even though we're a magazine, we're getting just as much as anyone else. So we've actually added a newsfeed to ours. So we're actually doing more regular content as well as the quarterly stuff.
So that's interesting. So that's create another area of content for yourselves with the newsfeed.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Tim?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We're all working in slightly different sectors. Jaimie in particular, what a fascinating, part of the market to be reporting on right now. From my side, I'm going to sort of drill into maybe some of our motoring titles. What we've done, there has been a lot of, it's about useful word again. There's a lot of useful. There's a need for useful explainers and helpful content at the moment. So, for instance, the government has actually announced a suspension of MOT tests. So every car after it's 3 years old has to have an annual MOT, make sure it's roadworthy. They've been suspended for 6 months. So, we need to explain that to users. And we've built whole clusters of really got digging around, trying to be useful and helpful. I think the other side on digital is we all know how important SEO is. I'm sure all your audience development teams, for all the people listening to the sort of panel conversation, we all know how important SEO is. For me, I've kind of used the analogy with my teams of if we emerge from this as a person, as an individual, if I say to my wife, if we emerge from this having not done nearly everything on our to-do list, all the jobs around the house, in the garden, all this time at home, I'll be really annoyed. And I kind of use a similar analogy with the digital teams, actually. I think, trying to find a little silver lining to this cloud. We now have the almost perfect excuse to just go and do all that housekeeping, all that sort of evergreen tidying up, the gardening, the stuff is important. And the reason we're doing that, although organic traffic at the moment is down, because people, particularly in the first couple of weeks, it really collapsed. People had better things to do and bigger concerns. But we want to build our websites into a strong position so when we do finally emerge from this, that we will have higher rankings. It's really working on Parker's and Car Magazine. At the moment, we can see our sort of the evergreen, the really important make, model, keywords we're chasing. We've got the time to go and do the gardening and make sure we're ranking strongly when the traffic does return, because it will return, even if that light at the end of the tunnel feels a long way off right now.
So in terms of print titles, are you having to rethink any of the frequency or the pagination sizes?
At Bauer, not yet. That is being looked at. I think Bauer's got 107 titles. I don't work on all of those, so I'm not au fait with all of them. So in our sectors, certainly in motoring at the moment, we're committed to the regular. The regular publishing is ongoing. Certainly the websites I work on, absolutely, totally committed to them. I think issue sizes in print are being looked at. It's highly likely, as I'm sure other panelists will probably see, that pagination will probably have to come down if advertising is coming down, which it is in virtually every case. Then issue sizes will probably reduce. Certainly online, we're not too affected by that, but we are seeing a drop in commercial as well. So, we have got a lot of tricky decisions at the moment. We might be the sites that are doing well, as Jaimie mentioned, it's probably quite difficult because you might not be able to monetize them. But therein lies a publishing dilemma. And the more from a digital perspective at all our websites, we're trying desperately. Our most successful websites are the ones which are diverse. Don't be reliant just on advertising revenue. If you are, that's going to get harder and harder in the years ahead. And I think this particular episode is showing that very clearly. So trying to make sure you've got other revenue raising. We've got Parker's has you can value your car. We then pay for upgraded valuations, all spec and mileage on your car to tell you what it's worth. Passing leads on to dealer groups for people who click on advertising. The more we can have rounded, robust, and quite rounded revenue streams on any website, really good. And I think that's being brought home at the moment, even though people aren't buying cars right now.
Okay, so that brings us on to an interesting point in terms of what is working in terms of actually being able to monetize it. How closely are you guys working with your commercial teams to be able to monetize the content? Jaimie, you say you've got terrific traffic, but you're struggling to actually monetize it?
Yeah, I've been working closer to the sales guys than I've ever done before, really. But it is problematic. As I said, if there's one industry that really shouldn't be, that should be spending money right now, it's the pharmaceutical industry. So, but it's the oncoming recession, I think, is what is stopping them. They're playing their cards close to their chest. What we're trying to do is tell them, look, this is something you would be associated with. We are providing a service now. It's a proper service where we're giving our readers information and filtering information in ways that will save lives. This is a good cause, and that's how we're trying to sell it. It was editorial led, obviously, but obviously that's also quite an attractive proposition for advertisers as well. We do tend to think. I think there is a feeling within the team that in March it was always going to be tough. also the end of the financial year as well. But actually, when they sit down and think about it, this is something that they might want to attach themselves to. At the moment, that's what we're hoping. We're hearing some noises, but in March, no, we were thinking of completely out of the box thinking about how we can try and monetize it, and we weren't really, and no one was really picking up on anything, unfortunately.
I've got a question actually from one of the participants, and they've asked about what about channels such as podcasts? Are there options to monetize these? I wonder with what you guys are doing, is that something that you would consider?
We're doing it. I mean, Bauer does a degree of podcasting. We don't do it on every title. I know the successful ones that spring to mind. The Empire podcast works really well. It's a chicken and egg situation with podcasting, I believe. You know, you need that scale to make any actual money out of it. Then you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? And I think the Empire team in films have just been plugging away for several years at kind of getting their podcast up and running. And they've got to a scale now where they are, you know, they're doing, I don't know the exact number, I don't work on Empire directly, but I believe it's kind of in the, you know, it's tens of thousands of downloads and you know, people who listen every month, and they are now monetizing that. You know, so they've got it. I think it's forcing all of us to sort of look at those new delivery mechanisms. You know, as I mentioned earlier, our iOS and Android editions, but they're really rising at the moment. Those the websites at the moment is quite challenging, as Jaimie's mentioned, but we believe the money will come back. Podcasting we're doing, I think Facebook Lives as well. We've done one a bit like this with some of our brands. I think MCN, the motorcycling website, did one last week. On Parkers we did it as well. So we are trying to reach audiences in new ways, even if it is challenging to maybe get them to pick up printed paper editions. I
mean, let's also be honest. Trying to make podcasts make money is one of the biggest challenges anyway. So let alone do it in an environment when because ultimately the problem is the advertisers who don't want to spend money. So all we can really do is try to build our audiences. And Jaimie needs to make sure that he engages as many of those 400,000 so that when this is passed, he's got new people that can change it. And it's the same for us. We're doing webinars because we want to engage more people. We're giving content away for free to engage more people because you've got to play the long game. So we could launch a podcast, but it won't make money. And even the podcasts that are really successful, they're brand extensions, and very few of them actually make money anyway, or at least profit. If you look at the time that goes in plus the tech behind it, there's so few that actually do it. So I think all we can really do in such a shrinking commercial market is try to engage more people. Hopefully, Maria, those 900 people will stay around for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and that's the longer term benefit that we can all gain. But in the short term, we're all just holding on. And, you know, obviously across the industry, there's, you know, people are being made redundant, journalists are being let go, and freelancers, you know, and certainly most of the editors I've spoke to, they're keeping all their stuff in-house. And I'm interested to see what everyone else thinks, but most of them are keeping the stuff in-house to reduce the cost. So it's a tricky time from that side. So all we can do is break up, really.
Completely agree on the podcast. And also I think anecdotally, when so many content providers are providing content for free, things like Audible, giving people access to Audible books for free now, and lots of others too, it's a very difficult market to sort of like pick up on now and also make money out of. Are there any other areas that we can monetize? I mean, certainly from our perspective, so I'm also the editorial director for APL Media as well as BSME chair, and from our side of the business, we obviously publish National Geographic Traveller. That's a difficult publication in the current climate, but we're kind of making it work. The other side for us is we can see that our newspaper publications that we do that run with things like Mail on Sunday or The Telegraph, they a couple of subject matters are doing very well. Anything to do with staying at home. I think somebody's asked a question about a reference, good food doing really well. Yeah, recipes, good food content is doing very well. Anything very much to do with staying at home. So where we can, we are picking up on that, and where we're creating content, particularly for the travel market, we are looking at more of the inspirational content, or the, as we call them, the long reads, things that you can sit there and read in your spare time as if you're being told a story. So certainly I think from our perspective, it's going to be tough to monetize things like podcasts, but let alone other things. I've got a couple of questions which pick up on things that we were going to pick up on anyway. Is one of our attendees has asked, are any teams being told to take pay or hours cuts, and how are we managing that? I can say for myself, unfortunately, we've had to furlough probably about 22 of our staff, some of the editors too, with the only in that, which then answers the next question that somebody then answered, only in that because we're combining a couple of issues. So our frequency is changing for travel. We've had to combine the next issue that we've got coming up, which is May, June. And yes, we have had to take pay cuts and also furlough staff. It's difficult. It's a tough time, especially as you're trying to create more content in-house, as Alex picked up on. Jaimie, you seem to be the lucky one in your team. The content that you're creating and the team that you've got, you need everybody, all hands on deck. So I suppose that's a good thing for you guys.
Indeed, but like I said before, we are 2 people down. We haven't been able to replace 2 people. So we are 2 people down. In terms of wider company, there has been a lot of furloughing. Obviously, the events team, there's absolutely no events happening, so unfortunately, they've had to be furloughed. We haven't been asked to take a pay cut, which is great. I know we're part of the lucky ones. One thing we do have to do is obviously look at our costs, freelancers, etc., etc. So I think like pretty much everyone, we aren't able to use freelancers anymore. So we've obviously got that extra work to do with a smaller team. As I said, I know we're the lucky ones. We haven't been asked to take a pay cut. No one's actually been made furloughed. No individuals in the team have been furloughed. So we are lucky, but it's not easy. There's far more content than ever before, fewer people. So I think this is probably the tail around the whole industry at the moment.
Yeah,
I think I speak to other editors as well. The combining issues thing is definitely, I know another title I sort of help out with, their combining issues. And I think there's going to be more of that because a lot of people are still in the current cycle of finishing an issue. And I would imagine more combined issues to happen in the next month. And that's also probably to do with you expecting to see more staff being furloughed as well. So, and in the bigger companies as well, that's happening right across the board. So yeah, I think combining issues is definitely one of the things a lot of people have considered. It depends on your sector, of course, and it depends your frequency, but certainly the monthlies or 10 issues or more, I'd expect a lot of them to combine issues. We're quarterlies, so we're not combining an issue because otherwise we'd be really stuffed. We'd lose the ones we've got. So I think it depends on the market.
We're looking at combining we've combined May and June. July and August is already as combined issue for Traveller. And then the future, not sure yet, but I'll ask Tim next what he's doing with what you're doing with your titles, and then jump on to looking at forward-looking content as well.
Yeah, I mean, Bauer is furloughing staff. It was announced this week. It wasn't the first company to move, but it has furloughed quite a few people. I mean, from my perspective, relatively fewer in the editorial space. I mean, it's much more in commercial and events and other parts of the business, which is it's ironic at this time when, of crisis. It's probably great indeed. I'm sure everyone on the call would think, we need our teams more than ever. So, I'm glad that at the moment editorial on the front of it. We have got some furloughed editorial staff within my teams, but only 2 people at the moment with my own teams. So there is an irony there. I think in terms of other things, we've spoken about the frequency of this already. One of the things we are doing, I mean, we have got a lockdown on digital freelance spend. One of the things we're doing, which is a very interesting option, I think I was thinking this issue, but it's a global company, and we're actually sharing content much more from some of our motoring titles, but also in Germany and Australia and the UK and Poland, we've got some really progressed, what was already happening a little bit, but this has been a catalyst for us talking much more often, almost daily actually, about trying to can we take some of our content from overseas and use in the UK where it feels appropriate. There's no pressure to have to do it, but if it's being created in-house there, essentially you can get content for free. It must have been quite an interesting learning curve. To translate text just for cultural differences. Titles generally have a very different approach to road testing to the UK way of reviewing cars, for instance. So across the board, we're having to reassess and look at things and try to be innovative, which is, I think we enjoy being innovative. It's just a shame it's been done in such tricky, difficult circumstances.
The irony for us is that we are now providing travel content globally, which we never thought we'd ever do for National Geographic, which seems really odd, but I suppose it's a nice position to be in. The Traveller USA magazine closed last year, and we are providing content for them generally anyway for the travel channels. And now we're being asked, as Tim has now also sort of found out, we're being asked for globally to assist other what we call our local language editions. So that's interesting. We'd like to see it being reciprocated as well, because I think I'd like to take advantage of that. Which brings me to the next question, which is very much forward planning. I mean, it's difficult to plan. I completely appreciate for the future, but even things like, Tim, how are you going to do road testing for cars and have content for the future? What are you using as backup? How much content do you have in the bag already to be able to look to the future? And how long can you last?
I think that I like that kind of, but it's like the larder, isn't it? We've been like,
the larder.
The larder has been quite well stocked, but it's it's increasingly feel like it's being panic bought. And that's where, working with the international colleagues has definitely helped us. I feel fortunate to have that at our disposal. And this is where the longer it goes on, it's probably my biggest, one of many concerns at the moment, but that is one of the biggest worries I have is about, the first 3 weeks, we've been working at home. This is our 4th week of working at home now, so being in the kind of, the sort of panic phase, as it were. And we're coping okay at the moment. We are beginning to ration. And this is where print is so different to digital. In digital, we, normally it's just a relentless conveyor belt. We're just trying to manage the speed of the conveyor belt at the moment to make sure we're not sort of using everything, too quickly. Anything that's newsworthy, any embargoed content. So typically the car world operates on a heavily embargoed basis. We are allowed to report on the new products at a particular time. All the major tier 1 outlets will write about it at the same time. That conveyor belt from manufacturers of new products to test has basically pretty much all but stopped at the moment. And I think the weeks ahead, the longer this goes on, the more challenging it will become. I think in digital, we've got that kind of, the gardening, housekeeping, the evergreen stuff, we can fall back on that. Whereas in print, it's going to be more challenging, I think, for those, print editors with flat plans where they want to have the latest big thing, sexy thing, what's everyone talking about. That conveyor belt is stopping. And the final point I'll say is, and I think we've all touched on this a little bit, about it's getting a balance right. I think editing is about good judgment, about getting a balance of content, the kind of the news. I mean, Jaimie's title is clearly very, very news-driven, I think. We're trying to provide enough of it to help, but I don't want people to come to our homepages and be, just kind of holding their head in their hands and feeling depressed. It's about a little bit of inspiration. You mentioned it, Maria, travel journal. Very much about inspiration. It's about a balance for me, and I think it requires very good judgment from editors right now. And if then the forward conveyor belt, the supply of ongoing good, new, fresh content is challenged, it's really hard. So I think what we're discussing here is fascinating, hearing how different teams are coping with it.
Jaimie, you are obviously working very much in the now, but are you looking ahead and thinking about how you might create content that will, how shall I say, last more than the now? For the future.
Oh, no. I mean, it sounds like I'm being quite smug here, but no. I mean, in terms of our content, literally can't see beyond the next hour. So, I mean, there was something last month that was quite interesting. So like I said, we had our 60th birthday issue for March, and I spent loads of time in the British Library. It's brilliant. I was looking through all the old issues and stuff. We had a whole month in March of just looking back and applying it to modern day. It was a huge amount of work. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was really good stuff. We haven't been able to use any of that, basically. All that work we've done has just had to go on the back burner. Partly because something picking up on what Tim was saying actually was getting the tone right has been probably the hardest thing for us. It's using that judgment to get the tone right. Like I said, our readers on the front line, they're seeing people that are transmitting the virus to them on a daily basis. We need to make sure that we are sympathetic to this. I'm thinking in a couple of years' time, how are we going to be seen? How is our behaviour going to be seen in 2 years' time? Are people say actually they did the right thing? Because that's going to be put us on a stronger long-term footing. So I'd say that's the problem. But in terms of looking forward, like I said, we've got the opposite problem actually. So we normally go to press on a Friday. We're a monthly magazine. We normally go to press on a Thursday/Friday. We can push it back. Comes out the following Friday. Now, this has proven an absolute nightmare for us. I mean, what can we write that isn't going to be out of date in a couple of hours' time, let alone a week's time? So we've had to be thinking like that. So for our last cover issue, we looked at the future. How's this going to change general practice forever? Which, I think that worked quite well. It was still valid a week later. We're going to have to do something similar for the next issue. What else can you do? You can't exactly put anything other than coronavirus on your cover. So what exactly are you going to do? So that's been a bigger problem for us. But no, we're very much living in the now. We're not even thinking about next week's time.
Yeah, of course. And Alex, over to you. You're quarterly, so a very different frequency. How do you look forward to planning the issue? Do you have enough content in the larder, as Tim says?
I don't know. I mean, we've had to bring ours forward because we got a note from our printers saying they might have to shut down. So we actually lost a couple of weeks, but the 2 weeks were down to WH Smith anyway. So without WH Smith, we've taken 2 weeks off the schedule. And actually, we also do a cricket mag, and it's a members one for MCC, and they decided they weren't going to mail their members. And this magazine has been print forever, so we had to build a digital platform and put the whole catalogue online for these MCC members who, interesting demographic, who aren't really generally digital savvy at all. So we had to create a whole new thing for them, and that could be the way forward for them for the foreseeable until we know when we're going to open up again. The beauty for us, I suppose, is that we tell a lot of stories that are from the past as well. I think the bigger challenge again is going to be the images. We don't use stock images, so we might have to look at how we face that going forward. And the only other thing was an event. We had our photography awards, which is our first ever one, which is going to be a 2-month exhibition at the World Rugby Museum. That's in June, so we're going to have to do all that in some online package or some kind of online event. So we're currently redoing that sort of event and another awards for another title are in September, and we're like, well, that's supposed to be a black tie one. How do you do that? You try to push it back a month, but then you know what it's like when you try to pick an event and you try to say, well, that's the one night of the week, let alone just pushing it back 4 weeks and hoping there's nothing else there. So that, I think, events outside of the mag's probably going to be a bigger challenge for us, and how we manage those without losing the impact. So yeah, I don't know the answers, to be honest, because we don't know how quickly the world's going to open up. So I think we're probably just going to have to take a hit on all of our events this year and just start looking towards next year to making them bigger and better than ever.
Hey Alex, can I ask you a quick question? Do you think? So I think the way we work as journalists is going to change probably forever. Actually, I think this idea of I've spent much of my career flying around the world. Actually, to go and do features and interview people, and I think this is just going to be a bit of a catalyst and accelerate the fact that actually we can do a lot. Like we are here. Video. I've interviewed several executives on video call or conference call in the last few weeks, where a few even 2 months ago, we would have hopped on a plane and I would have gone to Stuttgart to go and visit Porsche. You don't need to do all that, do you? I think it's going to make us more efficient in a way. I think it's going to accelerate the way we work. I think you have access to rugby players. I was wondering if you think the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think as you get more comfortable, the thing is, people are downloading all of this. So I don't know how many people we've got on this, but how many people downloaded Zoom? Probably a lot less, because they've already got it, than if we'd done this a month ago. Everyone would be downloading Zoom, or 90% of probably the people on this would have had to download Zoom. So they're becoming more comfortable with it. They're talking normally. And at the moment, I mean, this has been pretty good, actually. All our internet connections have been good. When we get back to normal, we've had a few issues with internet connections, which are particularly when you're spoke to someone in South Africa and their internet connection wasn't great. Different countries are, but when it all opens up, we'll have better internet connections and we'll all be much more comfortable. So I agree, it will just be the imagery. But maybe use someone on the ground a little bit more, or you'll just send the photographer over. So yeah, no, I do think that could definitely be the case.
Tim, it wouldn't work for us though, obviously.
No.
Coming from a travel side, although having said that, a lot of us are, particularly for traveller, we tend to use people that are from the destinations anyway, so in situ. So we don't use as much, we don't ask people to travel as much as we used to, so because that's part of what we do. But certainly we would, I suppose from our side, we are not confident of when travel will come back properly anyway. So I think even when the lockdown stops, it will take a very long time for people to want to get back on a plane or go for a cruise, for example. I think those things are going to be tough. But that's just how it would go. But I think in terms of interviewing and being able to talk to people like senior execs over Zoom, yes, we're part of a global company. When we're working with NGT, we're very used to Zoom because that's how the Americans operate. They seem to just love Zoom calls. So we tend to be on those quite a lot anyway. Very quick question. I know Alex touched on it on events. A couple of questions from the panel, from the attendees. They said, it would be interesting to know what other people are doing about events in the future. Most of ours now have been postponed for either next year or for later in the year. Alex has touched on it already. Tim, Jaimie, do you guys have any events that you had to sort of reconsider, or what are your plans for those?
Yeah, we've had to cancel events. I mean, maybe we're looking from a very pessimistic point of view about how long the lockdown's going to go on. We're not even considering like when there will be large public gatherings. You know, at a very worst case scenario, we're talking until we wait till a vaccine comes in. You know, mid next year. We don't know, and at the moment, I think we're not even thinking when we can do our next event. We have
cancelled rather than postponed.
Well, I say cancelled, but I guess because we're so close to it, we're wondering, you know, is there going to be a time this year when we can fit in, or are we looking at the same time next year, our annual conference? Is it even worth postponing? Is it going to be too close to next March when the 2021 annual conference is going to be? So we're not even thinking about that yet.
Okay. Tim, what about you guys? Have you got events that you've had to postpone or cancel, and what's your approach to them?
I think it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? It's a bit of cancellation, a bit of postponement. And I think the problem is, if you think of the number of venues, which, you know, most people on the call will probably be familiar with the big venues in central London that can take, 1,200 people or whatever. It's not many of them. There's going to be a massive roadblock. So I don't think that we're going to be able to postpone every event and shoehorn it into the autumn. So I think it's almost inevitable that quite a lot will be postponed until next year. So we're going to have to. I think it's still so fluid at the moment. A lot of this is up in the air, but probably wise at this point to take a pessimistic view, I'd say.
Yeah, we're very much doing the same, unfortunately. On that note, one of the questions from the attendees: how are you all keeping morale within your teams given the uncertainty of the future? Jaimie, you guys are really busy, so maybe I'll throw that to you first.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. I've actually had to tell my staff to not work so hard, to be honest. We've got to finish, we've got to log off at 6 o'clock on the dot, because otherwise we'd just be working until, 10 o'clock every evening. It's quite possible to be working and still not get everything done. So I've had to put a cut-off point at 6 o'clock. In terms of morale, we've got a lot of, proper news hounds in our team. So luckily, it's been really good so far for morale. I think we've been, keeping morale has been one of the easier parts, actually. I can completely understand why that won't be the case elsewhere, but for our lot, it's, when there's a massive story breaking it's literally every couple of hours, we're doing, this is what we live for, it's what we go to work for. So it's been okay in that case. There has been a problem in the rest of the company with furloughing staff, obviously, but within the team itself, done pretty well. We're doing the same with, daily meetings, blah, 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 daily catch up. We just talk about nothing. That kind of stuff. But other than that, that's not been a massive problem. Maybe they're watching there and don't completely disagree. I'll
wait to see if a question comes up from them. Alex, how are you keeping yourself alive and kicking and your team working hard and keeping spirits up?
I mean, it's been interesting. I'm part of two different teams, and one of them is very, very, very stressed. And it's tricky, but you try to... every time we have these calls as well, I think usually I've got a 4-year-old kicking around here. So we've got 2 kids and it's very difficult to keep the 3-4-year-old out of the way. And he just joins us. So Max has appeared in virtually everything. If it wasn't for the fact that he's doing his hourly exercise with his mum and his little 3-month-old sister. But actually stuff like that's been quite nice. On the rugby team, everyone's got kids. So they've generally been involved in a lot of the stuff. And I think there's something reassuring about seeing the same people and being able to talk through the same situation. One of the other teams we work on, they do a happy hour every Friday at 4:30 because most of that team is furloughed. So we still get together and everyone's in different parts of the country. Someone's in Scotland, someone's in the Yorkshire Dales, someone's in Finland, someone's in Cornwall, literally everyone's the four corners, but we have a happy hour every 4:30 on Fridays, and everyone gets a beer and just talks about nothing really. But it's still a nice way of bringing stuff together, and it's still those people who don't know when they're going to come back off furlough. It's still a nice way of getting together, but these are all small teams, so it's a bit easier to do, and not everyone wants to get together, but actually having those things in there has been quite nice. Same as when we've done things like random quizzes or things like that, when you've actually put a quiz together once a week, which everyone brings 5 questions, and I know not every team wants to do it, but actually people have wanted to do them because it's a nice way of getting together, and it's a date in the diary, because your diaries don't really mean anything now. So I think it's been good to have those little things, even if just the idea you're all separate and having a beer at the same time.
Tim, what about you guys?
Probably those guys say, really. I mean, Jaimie, what Jaimie describes, I think, that this is bringing out the best in our staff. I think that people just work their knackers off. They love the subject matter generally. Journalists don't know what they're writing about. And, trying to make sure we don't burn out is important. I think Bauer, the leadership, has really switched on to kind of mental health. There's a lot of mental health messaging going out across Bauer anyway at the moment, even before this all blew up. But at the moment, they're very concerned about that. So there are a lot of similar things. I think talking regularly, having these face-to-face interaction, even if it's very easy sometimes to do it on email. We try and bring, I try and speak to all my direct reports, certainly, but it was every single day. At the start of this, we're now doing it at least every other day. We're talking, so getting that face-to-face contact, making sure no one's isolated. I've got a young family here. It's been quite challenging with homeschooling. But not everyone does. We've got some young guys who live on their own, and trying to make sure they see a face and talk every day is important. Alex says. So we've, in fact, on Maundy Thursday tomorrow, Bauer, one of the radio DJs, Bauer owns Kiss and Absolute Radio and things. We've got one of our radio DJs is going to host the Bauer-wide quiz at 4:30 tomorrow. I think it's quite easy for editorial people sometimes to be a bit curmudgeonly about this sort of thing, and I'm really encouraging my team to actually, come on, let's put that to one side and let's go just do that and have a bit of fun. So I think we all need a bit of fun at the moment. Final thing, I'm so pleased it's sunny at the moment. If it was peeing down with rain and grey and miserable outside, I'd find it's much harder. But having a little bit of sunshine outside, it's just made everything a bit easier without being stuck at home.
Okay, that's great. I mean, in terms of us, I've got some of the team on the call, I can see. I would say I've probably talked to more of the team regularly than I've ever done before, and I think hopefully that's a good thing. They can probably correct me if I'm wrong later. I now have like a daily sort of 10:30 meeting with the whole team, and that seems to be a nice way of sort of going through and checking up on everyone, checking they're okay. I'm hoping to have a call this afternoon. I don't know who's going to turn up. I've called them blue and green teams randomly, but I've got a blue team that was working in the office and a green team that furloughed, but I want to keep in touch with both of them. Done that outside of my work email, and sort of doing that and hoping that will work for them. I think, it's important to just keep touching base with them. Some are not so lucky to have, maybe they don't have green space outside and stuff, and maybe they're stuck in smaller rooms. So I think it is tough for some people to keep their morale up. So it's for us to sort of talk to them generally and just make sure that they're okay. So that's kind of what we're doing. We've got a couple of minutes left. It's just, if any of the panel, if the panel don't mind, I have Helena Lang who's put her hand up, so I'm going to allow her to talk and ask a question. So let's give that a go. Helena, you're on if you would like to talk. She's on mute. Helena, you're on mute. So, my fault. I need to unmute you. Hang on. No, it's not working. Helena, if you'd like to, perhaps write your question. It won't allow me to unmute you for some reason. Talking permitted, but won't allow me to. Apologies. Can't do that. Okay. So I think other than that, I would just like to go through the panelists and just say, is there any top tips that you'd like to give current editors and editors to keep the morale up? And then we'll wrap up for today. So Alex, shall I start with you? Because you're looking outside the window. You look like you want to go.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I've actually had to be organised with my day for the first time ever, because we've obviously got different clients as well. We do contract publishing too, so we've got about 6 different clients who all want more than ever before. for obviously a lot less. And so I've actually had to put a structure to my day. So can't see it even behind me, but on that wall behind is actually a schedule for today, which includes feeding the ducks with Max, because he's now become an expert at feeding the ducks during his exercise time. So yeah, I've actually tried to be organised. There's no hope. I love Tim's idea of doing the garden, all that lot. Tim, how old are your kids?
About 11 and 13.
Yeah, see, that's the difference. When they're like 3 and 4, the idea of us, being fitter, being healthier, not drinking as much, when you've got like 3-month-old and doing house stuff is just impossible. I cleaned the house properly, top to toe, and then one afternoon with the 3-year-old and the whole place was destroyed again, and probably needing more paintwork as well. So I've tried to be organised, but that's the best I can hope for, really. But we're storytellers, so it's really our duty to keep going.
So your tip would be keep organised and keep a structured day, and feed ducks when you get a chance.
Basically, yeah.
Jaimie?
So I think for me, there's a couple of things. So the first thing is, this is, without trying to put too much drama on this, this is the biggest thing that's happened since the Second World War. You're going to be judged in future on how you have behaved in this. I think, to me, it's looked like everyone has actually been very responsible. I mean, I've seen a lot of responsible journalism, even from a health specialist health point of view. I haven't seen anything that's really outraged me. Other than, who was it? Was it Dan Hanan's? At least we're going to bring back curtsying now instead of shaking hands. But other than that, I've not really seen anything that's been absolutely ridiculous. So I'd say the first thing is think about how you want to be judged. We're all in this. We are genuinely all in this together this time. But the second thing, it might be slightly contradictory as well, is, and I don't know if I should really say this, but what we're doing doesn't really matter that much. We're not treating patients. We're not even collecting bins. We're not serving people essential food. If there are mistakes, there are mistakes. I think that's what I said to the team. Just step back and just think it's what we're doing is not essential. Even us trying to provide information to GPs, if we weren't there, what would happen? Some people would be worse off, but it's not a massive issue. So I don't really know whether that's a great piece of advice, but that's the piece of advice.
I brought everyone up, and Jamie's just brought us all back down again. None of us matter, guys.
Tim, you need to lift us up again. I'm moving away from Jaimie.
Tim. Someone positive, Tim. Go for it from your fireplace.
Well, go on.
From the fireplace, yeah. Do you love his fireplace? Look at him. Obviously not London.
I did.
He's pitching to country life for a new job, I think, at the same time.
I did one of these last week. I did a Facebook Live last week, and I thought it'd be quite nice to have the fire on. Oh my God, I really burned. I was like, well, really by the end. For me, it's about staying positive. I'm a pretty optimistic kind of guy. I think we all know our industry is going through a lot of travails anyway. It's a hard time. Journalism's being ripped apart and reshaped by a lot of digital forces in particular, and market disruption. And I think we need to kind of have a mindset where we just see this as something else we need to kind of be able to cope with. And I think if we go in with a positive mindset, that we will emerge from this stronger than we went in, and that's the approach we're trying to take. I think that'll sustain us, and just being, we as journalists and editors, the audience here today are editing titles, whether it's print or digital or whatever you are editing. And I think we're the masters of and mistresses. We understand the need to evolve, to adapt. The old way of doing things won't cut it. And I think this particular crisis is just underlining that. So I think stay positive. I firmly believe, even despite all the chaos, and one of the guiding lights I try and instill in my digital journalists is there is going to be a need for really good quality storytelling. And that's the case. Even with this digital disruption that's already happening, I try and make my digital editors think that way. Have quality at the heart of it. A good judgment that Jaimie and I and Alex and Maria are talking about. Have that at the heart of your content strategies. There will be that need. It's going to be reshaped and by some of the big macro forces already underway. This is just going to accelerate some of that. It's going to be some very tricky weeks and months ahead, I fear. But hold dear to that, stay true to it, make sure you can innovate and deliver that. And I think we'll be okay because there's still a need for it.
Yeah, especially in particular, really important, subscribe to the Rugby Journal. So all of the answers for Editorial is the Rugby
Travelling
Journal.
ahead. No, subscribe to Traveller. You need to think about the future. when we're out of lockdown. Yeah, I would echo Tim and actually some of what the whole panel has said. I think we do need to stay positive and stay inspired, which is funnily enough what we're going to be doing with one of our campaigns that we're looking at. But try and innovate the existing content that you have and think about what you might want to read right now, as well as what people around you would want to read, because I think if you're feeling how you're feeling, then they're probably feeling it too. So think about content that makes sense right now, and then we'll look to the future when we can. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody on the panel. Thanks to Alex, Tim and Jaimie, and thank you to Juliet, who's hiding behind the BSME, Juliet and David, who is hiding behind the logo, who organised this. This is the beginning of a series, so do keep an eye out on our social media and website to find out about the next one, along with the panel discussions we have coming up, and of course news on our forthcoming talent awards, which we are obviously moving to be something a bit different than what we planned. No event plan there. We hope you enjoyed this first ever webinar, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Any ideas that you have and any feedback, do please drop us a line and let us know what you'd like to hear about or what more questions you'd like answered. We can, we're looking at having different panelists each time, so it could be something that you could put forward as well. So thank you everyone. All the best. Stay safe, stay positive.
Take care, guys.